The air was cool and refreshing when she burst into the car and began playing with John Haskins' long brown hair. John glanced in the rearview mirror, knowing his 5-year-old daughter Marcy might want to comment, and she did it. "Your hair is growing so much, Dad. Enjoy it while you can. I'm starting to get bald spots and my hair is thinning a lot. Maybe soon I'll be as big as a billiard ball." "What is going bald, Dad?" "That means you can polish my head and watch the sun reflect off of it." "It would be fun, Dad, to polish your head and Sparky could lick the dust off it with his tongue." The 1-year-old golden retriever assumed he was in for a treat when he heard his name. He sat on his hind legs and began to wiggle his paws to beg. "Any more dog treats, Daddy?" "Should be in the red bag on the floor. But be careful not to knock everything over. I was already having a hard time getting everything in there." She leaned toward the seat until her hands began to fumble around the bag. John sighed. He suddenly remembered that he had stupidly put the dog treats in first, which meant that the contents of the bag would soon be scattered all over the floor and seat. He sighed in defeat. That's life when you have a dog. However, he wouldn't trade this golden mongrel for anything in the world. Sparky was considered part of the family. As she emptied the contents of her bag, the wind began to swirl around wrappers, comics, and magazines in the back seat. He pressed the button to close the window. Having the sunroof open was enough. "Don't give Sparky too much. The last time he got sick was when you let him eat the whole bag, remember?" "I remember, Dad," Marcy assured him. "Just a little, I promise." John smiled, knowing that just a little could mean anything to a child, 2, 4, or even 10. Suddenly, a foul smell hit their nostrils. Marcy felt it too and made a face, pausing to pass the treat to Sparky by holding her nose. A long row of septic tanks and rotting garbage was quickly identified as the culprit. The Henry Mason landfill sign was barely hanging on to the crumbling fence. Dumping trash and unwanted personal items on highways was a serious offense with heavy fines. But throwing it into a pile of garbage that was already gigantic was unlikely to backfire on you anytime soon. The highway began to narrow into layers of swirling dust on both sides, accompanied by dry bushes and parched, yellowish bindweed. "We'll be there soon, Dad." John looked carefully at the highway. This certainly wasn't the same road he'd driven Marcy down the last time they'd gone to visit her grandparents. He sighed wearily. Somewhere along the road in the last half hour, he must have made a wrong turn or missed a fork, although he could not remember how it happened. He pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. There was not a single car in sight. He began to think seriously about the way he had come, trying desperately to recall his route in memory. The trip was quite simple. He had been here twice before and always took the scenic route, which took 3 hours. He checked his watch. They showed 1:30. Having left San Antonio at exactly 10:15, he was now exactly 15 minutes later than his usual arrival time. He closed his eyes and tried hard to remember every convention he had attended since the beginning. Marcy didn't care that he stopped. She was too busy receiving affection from Sparky, who kept begging her for treats. He remembered driving out of San Antonio on Highway 35 North. They stopped in Waco at a Wendy's for lunch, where there was an incident involving ketchup on Marcy's dress and an orange drink spilled on his pants when she tried to remove a toy from a baby set he had bought for her. This memory made him smile. Children will remain children. After stopping at Wendy's, he remembered reaching a fork in the road that separated 2 highways, one leading left to Fort Worth and the other leading right to Dallas. He turned left as usual and reached Route 22 after passing through Fort Worth as usual. From there, he drove east on Highway 20 until he reached Abilene, then turned south, following a road where a sign read, "Tascola 15 miles. The Texas sun was shining brightly, reflecting off the windshield and making it difficult for him to see the sign just 20 feet to the left. He got out and walked 10 feet until he saw him. It said Tascola 1 mile, but the arrow pointed in the opposite direction. Damn, he whispered, realizing that he had somehow missed the small town where his wife's parents lived. He got back into his $80,000 BMW and spun around, kicking up a cloud of dust as he hissed off in the opposite direction. "Are we lost, Dad?" Marcy asked, noticing the look of urgency and confusion on his face. John had forgotten the name of the street where Marcy's grandparents lived, and because there were so few houses or businesses nearby, he couldn't stop and ask anyone. In the distance was a large red barn, and next to it hung a sign that read, Tascola, population 950. After a few yards, he finally spotted the road sign he was looking for. It said Buffalo Gap Road. He smiled and breathed a sigh of relief as he turned right to head north. As he passed the intersection, he noticed a fallen road sign on the other side of the street. He nodded at the sight of this. No wonder he missed it. The farms gradually gave way to a small town center, where 4 or 5 restaurants and a half-dozen craft stores stood next to an antique store and a cozy guest house. "It's not that far," John promised, glancing in the rearview mirror and not seeing his daughter. He quickly turned his head and saw her lying on the seat, snoring. Her golden dog nestled next to her, looking guilty, his mouth open, breathing heavily, his tongue hanging limply, a clear sign that he had eaten too many treats and was now suffering from a stomach ache. Marcy had been too excited the night before and suddenly gave in to the urge to sleep. "Poor thing," he whispered. "She must be exhausted." Suddenly, a text message arrived. He took the cell phone from its holder on the dashboard and saw that it was from his wife, Stacy. The message read, "At the airport, about to board. Should be in Florida in a few hours. If we're lucky, we'll be on board the cruise ship by 5:30. Goodbye, I love you. Kiss Marcy for me." John threw the phone back into its holder. "We'll answer her later. He's glad she left. Her sister's wedding in the Bahamas will give her the rest she needs." John knew it would also give their bored marriage a chance to reignite. They say that absence makes the heart beat faster. Whenever Stacy went away for a week or two, they always fell passionately in love upon her return. This thought excited him. He crossed the railroad tracks and saw that the exit was close, but an approaching train caused the long wooden barrier to lower and the red lights to start flashing. The bell also began to ring, signaling that the train would soon pass. He sighed and cursed himself for missing the chance to cross paths. Now he faced a delay of 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the speed of the train and the number of cars. He turned on the radio and began to listen to the velvety voice of Hank Williams, crying about infidelity and fickle wives. The music irritated him. As much as it was classic and revered in the crappy state of Texas, he had a hard time admitting to himself that he preferred disco. He turned the radio dial relentlessly, switching from pop to rock to R&B to hip-hop and back to country. He hoped to find a disco, but stations rarely played it during the daytime. A sudden knock on the window startled him. He turned to his left and saw the beautiful face of a young black woman who seemed to be hoping he would roll down his window. He pressed the button and lowered it halfway. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her perfect rows of gleaming white teeth flashing before his startled eyes. "And I'm sorry if I seem a little taken aback," he replied. "I was deep in thought, listening to the radio, when you knocked. At first, I thought it was a policeman." She laughed. "I'm not a cop, just a woman with a problem. I need help, and I thought since you're stuck waiting for a train, you might be able to help." "What is the problem?" "I was on my way back from the antique store, and my car broke down. The garage is about a mile back, so I need to be towed. My phone was dead, and I thought." "Would you like to use my phone?" "Sure," he said, taking it out of its holder. He handed her the phone just as the ominous ringing suddenly stopped. They were both surprised to see the barrier rising so quickly. "It wasn't that big of a train, was it?" she remarked, watching as the lights stopped flashing, making way for him. Only a few carriages. I don't remember seeing one this short. Look, I have to go, John explained. But why don't you leave my phone and call the garage? You can tell them where you're stuck and where to go. I'll be driving back in 10 minutes, and you can return and give me the phone number. That would be wonderful, she said, her face lighting up. You saved my life. You're welcome, he said. I'll see you soon. He let the window roll up, its tinted glass preventing her from getting a good view of the interior as he drove away. She didn't notice Sparky or Marcy in the back seat and assumed he was alone. She watched him drive away. He was Caucasian with long, curly brown hair that was starting to thin and the dreamiest emerald green eyes she had ever seen. He also had a brilliant, blindingly white smile, and a quick glance at his tight t-shirt told her that he had abs and chest muscles underneath. However, her most urgent task right now was not to look at some dreamy, handsome guy driving an almost 100,000th car, but to call the garage and arrange for her car to be repaired. He drove north 2 stoplights, then turned left at the gas station and onto the street where Stacy's parents lived. 60 seconds later, he was there, pulled into a long driveway, then onto the circular lot in front of a house that stretched over 5,000 square feet. On each side are 5 acres of red spotted apple trees and winding, mesmerizing streams filled with trout and bass. He loved this place and would come here more often if Stacy's father, Stephen, still hadn't forgiven him for the time he made the mistake of having a brief affair with his secretary. It was just a one-time affair in a cheap motel, and only his tormented conscience became the reason that someone found out about it. He confessed this temptation to his wife, believing that she would quickly forgive him for his lack of will and judgment. But she was devastated and shocked, cried for months, visited divorce lawyers, and constantly struggled with jealousy. As a result, she temporarily ended up in a psychiatric hospital. He knew from the moment he told her about his betrayal that it was a serious mistake. It would be better to keep quiet about it and not risk anything like this again. His secretary was horrified that he told his wife about their one-time affair. She certainly wouldn't have said anything, and it bothered her beyond belief that he had so foolishly pushed Stacy to the brink of insanity and nearly ruined her life, not to mention her once strong and proud marriage. But this all happened 4 years ago, just a year after Marcy was born. Stacy was just starting to get her life back on track, but her father was not a man who easily forgives and forgets the cruel cheater who broke his daughter's heart into a million pieces. As far as he was concerned, and always would be, John was nothing more than a mixture of scum and scum. He only tolerated his son-in-law for Mercy's sake. John turned off the engine and didn't even need to get out of the car. Stacy's mom, Angela, ran out of the house, jumping down the cobblestone path. She was not so strict with John. She always loved him and ironically noted that her own husband was also not always ideal when it came to flirting with secretaries. John looked at Angela happily, and she smiled back at him, allowing him to kiss her cheek as he got out of the car. "It's good to see you again, John," she said sincerely. "My husband is in the backyard right now. He's busy fixing the fence," she lied, not wanting John to know that after 4 years of endless repentance, he still hadn't been able to earn his father-in-law's forgiveness or favor. She frowned when she didn't see Marcy immediately jump out of the car. Even Sparky seemed indifferent and lethargic, just breathing in the dry Texas heat. "Don't mind him," John remarked matter-of-factly. "He's probably got a stomach ache. You know how Marcy loves handing out dog treats. As for Marcy, she's just dead to the world, I'm afraid. She was so excited to know she was coming here that she was too excited to sleep all last night. It's a shame you can't bring Marcy here more often. We both know how your husband feels about me. He can't see me. That's because his daughter is the most important thing in his life. Seeing you hurt her drove him crazy. But over time..." John looked at her skeptically. If Stephen hadn't forgiven him for 4 long years for one betrayal, then the chances of him starting to do so now were slim. "He will never forgive me. Think positively. He'll soften up eventually. How are you and Stacy doing? she asked cautiously. I know she's been really happy lately. Maybe if you keep her happy, he'll see the light. We get along great. We've never been closer than we are now, he lied. On Stacy's part, the emotion of love for John was probably real. However, on his part, he knew all too well that the emotion of love had not yet disappeared, but was fading quickly. He was one of those men who loved to have sex with their wives every day. Unfortunately, his wife Stacy only needed sex once a month. This major difference was taking its toll on them, and John knew that just 12 times a year would definitely not make him happy or satisfied. However, he knew that if he could just accept such a strict and sparse distribution of love, it would be good for the preservation of their strained marriage. Marcy woke up and her eyes lit up. "Grandmother," she exclaimed, kissing her enthusiastically. "Are you sure you can handle her and the dog for 2 whole weeks?" John asked cautiously. "I know you offered to take Marcy and Sparky for the entire 2 weeks while Stacy is on the cruise. But I think 2 whole weeks might be too much for you. How about we split the time? I'll come over in 7 days and take them for another week." "Don't be stupid. We see her so rarely anyway. Time spent with her will be so enjoyable. So go away and don't you dare come back for at least 2 weeks. Besides, Stacy said you're busy writing a new novel right now. You'll probably need some quiet, won't you?" "It's true," he answered honestly, all too aware of how his publisher was beginning to seriously pressure him. The drive back down the road leading to Buffalo Gap Road made him nervous. In the back of his mind, he was still thinking about the incredibly beautiful black girl he had left about 5 minutes ago, on the other side of the railroad tracks. She was dressed seductively and provocatively in the Texas heat, her generous cleavage showing off her delicious breasts under a tight blouse that made his heart beat faster. She certainly had a sinful figure, and the memory of her round ass bulging under her tight short skirt was seared into his tormented mind like a dangerous mine. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in that same tormented brain. She came across as extremely friendly and perhaps a little too approachable. But this possibility was not so easy to determine without further investigation. Some of the women were friendly and accommodating, but not as readily available when it came to sex. Others were shy and seemed the opposite of slutty until you gave them half a chance. He wasn't sure which of these categories fit this incredibly sexy black girl. He only knew that if he wanted to save his marriage and bring it to full restoration, then he seriously needed to resist the desire to be guided by something other than his head. Befriending a damsel in distress is a recipe for disaster. Even thinking about the possibility of having sex with a stranded car lady was pure madness at best and absolute stupidity at worst. He drove over the tracks and stopped for a moment on the side of the road. He noticed that her car was missing, no doubt taken away in a tow truck. "That was fast," he muttered to himself. But then things often happen faster in a small town, as did the spread of gossip. He was suddenly glad that the girl and her car had disappeared. The flying tongues could cut you to pieces in a matter of minutes and spread stories that could get you into trouble you'd never get out of. Everyone knew Stacy's grandparents, and some also knew Marcy and her father. John lowered his head. If he was stupid enough to even think about having a cup of coffee with a lady in trouble, someone in the small town would undoubtedly recognize him and would undoubtedly tell everyone around him that Stacy's husband was flirting with some hot, sexy babe who seems to really want to get to know him better. But for that to happen, the sexy black beauty would have to think he was single. He looked at his empty finger. Just last week, he gave away his wedding ring to have it downsized. His months of gym work and a heavier diet resulted in the finger becoming swollen. A sudden knock on the window scared him to death. He pressed a button, and the window began to roll down. "You scared me," he said. "I thought you left with your car, didn't you?" "Well, I wanted to leave. But then I remembered I had your phone, and I knew you'd come back for it. I didn't want you to think I stole it after you were so kind as to lend it to me." "That's very thoughtful of you," he said. She handed him the phone. "Thank you," he said, testing the discipline while his mind screamed at him to leave immediately so as not to be tempted to flirt. "Can you do me one more little favor?" she asked. "By staying here to return your phone. I'm now left without transportation. The garage is only a 5-minute drive, but I'll have to walk there for about 20 minutes. Would you mind giving me a ride?" His mind was now screaming at the rest of his body to leave immediately before it was too late. He came up with the idea of giving her $20 and calling a taxi. Why tempt fate? "Of course, I'll give you a ride. Sit down," he said. "No, no, no," John shouted to himself in the silence. "Do not be an idiot. You know how weak you are, and she is so friendly and sexy. This is a recipe for disaster, and—" She opened the passenger side door and sat down next to him. After closing the door, he noticed her glance at his left hand, apparently looking for a wedding ring, but not seeing it. She decided to clarify. "It's very nice of you to help me. I hope I'm not making it difficult for you. Your wife is probably already going crazy with worry. Where are you if you're married?" It was her indirect way of saying that he liked her and that she might not mind going out with him, as long as he wasn't married. She looked straight into his dreamy green eyes, waiting for an answer. It never occurred to her that he might lie. "I'm not married," he lied. "No, no, no, you idiot," he shouted to himself. "Why did you tell her this? She obviously likes you, thinks you are handsome, strong, nice, smart, charming, and rich. But now, because of your damned lies, she also thinks that you are free. You're an idiot." The corners of her beautiful red lips lifted slightly into a smile. "I have a better idea," she said suddenly. "I'm starving because I haven't had lunch yet. If you give me a ride to a restaurant before you take me to the garage, I could get something to eat and also buy you dinner for your help. Just a few blocks from where they towed my car. There's a great place. How about that?" "Well, you're a very nice girl. It's nice and fun to talk to you. I can't think of a better way to spend a couple of hours. Of course, I'm hungry. Only if we go, I insist that I pay. Repairing your car will cost you a pretty penny anyway." Her spirits soared. He gave her 3 flattering compliments in one sentence. He really turned out to be one nice guy. The urge to give him a quick kiss on the cheek as gratitude suddenly overwhelmed her. But she decided that any display of affection on her part should be accompanied by a guarantee from him that he was indeed available if she decided to begin the dating process. She was not a woman who would agree to share a man or fight for him. Either he was completely free to meet, or he wasn't. She sought clarity before letting her hopes fall into the abyss of infatuation. "Are you sure you're not married, engaged, or dating someone?" she asked warily, trying to take in all the possible options before letting her heart take a leap and her lips capture his lovely, warm, handsome mouth and luscious, stubbled cheeks. "I'm not dating anyone at the moment," he replied convincingly, upgrading her hopes from hopefully to, "Wow, this guy is really too good to be true, and he's actually available for a serious relationship." She gave him a playful kiss on the cheek. "What is this for?" he asked. "For all your compliments. You seem like a really nice guy. By the way, my name is Cassie Devereaux." "I'm not a really nice guy," he screamed to himself. Then he thought, also to himself, "I am a worthless scoundrel who is misleading you, and I need to get out of this fantasy relationship before it starts. It's not fair that I misled you. I'm John Haskins, and you seem like a truly wonderful young woman." The words just came out of his mouth, making her feel ecstatic, but making him feel like a mean snake on the grass. The flirting that had ruthlessly gotten him into trouble with his secretary all those years ago was now carefully paving a path to the vulnerable heart of this new girl. He started the engine and drove off. "It's just to the right of Buffalo Gap on 2nd Street north of here. Then a block away, on the north side, you'll see a Danny's Place sign about 20 feet high. You can't miss it." "Danny's Place?" "Yeah, I've been there a couple times. If I remember correctly, they have great lasagna." That's right. They specialize in Italian and Chinese food. He turned right and looked for the neon sign on the right. He didn't have to go far. He pulled into the driveway, got out of the car, and hurried to open the door for her before she could get out herself. "Thank you," she said, clearly stunned. No man had ever come out to open a car door for her before, and it made her feel special. She sighed at how impressively his list of accomplishments grew. As they walked up the steps, she seemed to slip a little. She resisted, but he took the opportunity to instinctively put his arm around her thin waist to help her inside. It was sensual, and she loved the way he held the door open again, allowing her to enter first. The air conditioning immediately washed over them, soothing their sweaty foreheads, making them relaxed and comfortable. Cassie ordered fish soup with broccoli and soda. John ordered the same. He did this thinking that she might get the impression that they were very similar. He also suggested that a dish of harmless fish might be more appealing than a piece of red meat, which some sensitive women find too macho. She liked that each table had its own coin-operated jukebox. The one at their table looked well-groomed, although he was 30 or 40 years older than them. She looked for change, but did not find any suitable coins. "How much do you need?" he asked. "2 quarters should be enough," she replied. "I remember throwing coins into this device when I was a kid. It's the only restaurant I know that still uses them." "So you grew up here, in this small town?" "Yeah," she confirmed. "Born and raised. Only now I live in Dallas, about 2.5 hours from here. I run a small antique store there. I got a call from an old friend from an antique store over here saying they got something really interesting for an incredibly low price." "Price? We are friends, so I knew that they would not mislead me. It turned out that they were right. Only my car broke down, so now any profit I make will go towards repairing it." "A life story, I suppose," he said, adding a smile of encouragement. He began to look more closely at her in the bright, but not blinding, lighting of the restaurant. She was extremely beautiful, with magnificent large breasts. He tried to estimate her age, peering more purposefully. She was incredibly sexy, with a figure that had truly dangerous, alluring curves. He guessed that she was about his age, 36. "I'm 35, if that's what you're trying to guess with your intense gaze." John was stunned. "What are you, a psychic? Did you know that I was trying to guess your age?" "Not psychic, just intuitive. Sometimes I can pick up on things. I have a built-in fortune teller in my crazy mind that guides me. So, yeah, call it intuition if you want. Everyone in my family says so. They think it's pretty amazing." John suddenly became nervous. He watched and thought about how wonderful it would be to make love to such a stunningly beautiful girl. "Besides, I don't want you to start blushing," she added, "but I know you find me quite attractive." John was amazed, but he was also a little scared. He had read about people like her, but she had not yet realized that he was married and was trying to seduce her. His face was actually starting to take on a slight pink tint. "Oh, and what else does your unusual intuition say about me?" She smiled warmly and leaned forward until she was eye to eye with him. She tells me that you're very cute, with dreamy eyes and strong, defined features that go well with a little stubble. She also tells me that you have this cute dimple right here, and that you obviously work out a lot in the gym, because under that shirt, there's obviously a very strong body." John laughed. "I'm flattered by what you said about my appearance, but you don't have to be psychic to notice it. Just opening your incredibly beautiful eyes was enough." "Really? What's so incredibly beautiful about my eyes?" John plunged into complete panic. He knew all too well that his little game was not only dangerous, in the sense that it could burst like a bubble, but also extremely unfair, since he was manipulating Cassie's heart and mind, slowly leading her down the path that would ultimately be overgrown only with weeds. "Are you okay?" she asked, changing from her carefree mood to a worried one. "But why? You seem a little distant, like you're preoccupied with something." It's nothing serious, really. You just remind me of a girl I used to date, he lied, trying to be quick on his feet. Like you, she was very beautiful and fun to be around. Like you, she was charming and had a warm, sparkling personality. So now my personality sparkles. You sound corny, although your words strike my heart like a dagger. And yet, it is difficult for me to get a complete picture of you. But my intuition usually becomes cloudy when I have a personal interest in the person I am trying to understand. Personal interest? She shrugged shyly. Yes, if I like someone. When I start to love someone, my internal alarm goes off. You throw compliments at me like hand grenades, and they begin to muddy the waters where my intuition used to be crystal clear. I feel that you are hiding something, but it might just be something unpleasant from your past. So, this girl I remind you of, what happened to her, if you don't mind telling me? No, I don't mind at all. I think it's good therapy for me to talk about it. Before I could really get to know her, the company she worked for transferred her to another country on the other side of the world. And you miss her. We haven't dated long enough for me to miss her in the love sense, but in the really like sense, honestly, I get the same feeling just sitting across from you now. You remind me of her a lot. She was very special. Those two words, very special, made her sway. She was weak on compliments, and he loaded them quite heavily, cutting through her objectivity and dissecting her will. She began to seriously panic, realizing that the small path of least resistance was now illuminated on the path to her heart. He started to reach her. However, there was something unsettling about him that she just couldn't read. Her suddenly strong feelings for him were definitely starting to cloud her usually powerful radar. "Are you sure you're not dating someone?" she blurted out, unable to stop the words from falling out of her mouth like stones rolling down a mountain. She assumed that her desperate statement betrayed her budding infatuation with his boyish charm and stunning appearance. He decided to act cruelly. He laughed as he spoke. "There's no one right now, unless of course you want to start dating me." "Why me?" she asked, still insisting on compliments. "You seem like a very nice girl, and I keep promising my mother and grandmother that one day I'll bring a girl home to meet them. I think it's about time. I think they've almost given up on me getting married. Although I would really like to settle down in life. I'm definitely ready to start a family. I just haven't found the right girl yet." Her face lit up and her eyes began to glow at his words. Real guys never talk like that, but in her opinion, he wasn't a real guy. He was more like a hero trying to be some lady's knight in shining armor. Despite how superficial and suspicious his advances seemed, they had a powerful charm. And after 35 years of unsuccessful attempts to find a suitable groom, she was now ready to cling to his words like a drowning man to a life preserver. She was no longer getting any younger and was desperately looking for this evasive husband. In a way, John was presenting himself to her on a silver platter. She had waited her whole life for such a man, persistently resisting the urge to become interested in men who were only looking for one-night stands or long-term relationships. She looked at him carefully. He seemed too good to be true. Could he be the one who finally brings her to the altar? His words seemed to indicate that he was looking for the exact same things she was looking for. She decided to let her guard down. "I have a confession," she said, smiling widely again. "I've never dated a white guy before, so there are things I need to know ahead of time." "Such as?" "Like, are white guys as alive as they say?" "Before I dare answer that," he said playfully, "you'll have to tell me if it's good or bad." She shrugged and laughed at the same time. "A little hand around my waist every now and then, or a little nose in my hair to catch the scent of a breathtaking perfume, or a few wet kisses when the time is right. All of this is not just normal, but highly desirable. What annoys us women in the early stages of a relationship is excessive groping, or constant touching, or octopus hands reaching for forbidden places like breasts or buttocks." "I'll try to remember that," he said, his heart pounding at how recklessly deep he was drawing them both into a mutual attraction that could ultimately destroy them both. Their flirtatious verbal exchanges and admiring glances were setting the stage for escalation, and she was bracing herself for it. Usually this was the moment when the guy either deepened the relationship or left her to her fate. "How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?" she dared. 36. "Only a year older than me." "This is the first time," he remarked mischievously. "I've met a woman who volunteered her age twice within 5 minutes." "There's always a first time," she admitted, momentarily lost in his mesmerizing eyes. He felt her vulnerability. Before she could recover, he brought his attractive mouth much closer until he caught her plump lips by surprise. The kiss was exciting, but unashamedly bold. A wave of pleasure swept through her entire body, and she allowed their lips to remain together forever, where they flowed sweetly into each other. He crossed the border, but it was a calculated risk. She didn't fight him back. When he finally freed her, he knew that the potential to cause her real, irreparable harm was now unequivocally real. Alarm bells were screaming inside his head, begging him to back off and let her go. But his conscience was sluggish and unresponsive. He suddenly hated himself. Was he really going to continue to mislead her? He knew that what he was doing was clearly unfair, not only to Cassie, but also to his wife Stacy. And of course, there was always his precious daughter Marcy to remember. Was he going to risk ruining her life too? Part of him pretended that his infatuation with the beautiful and sexy Cassie couldn't possibly cause any problems. But part of him was in panic and disbelief. How was he going to stop himself? "John, are you sure everything is okay?" "Huh? You're doing it again, becoming distant, lost in distant thoughts. Are you sure everything is okay?" Before he could respond or reconsider his position, 2 large plates of fish, salad, and mini potatoes in lemon sauce were brought to their table. "I'll be back with your sodas in a minute." "Is there any wine?" John asked, almost mechanically, unable and unwilling to restrain his tongue, which was becoming more and more dangerous. The waitress pointed to a triangular menu next to the jukebox. He turned to Cassie. "I forgot to ask if you would like something from the bar. A bottle of wine would go well with the fish. If I order, will you at least have a glass? I don't like drinking alone." She looked at him carefully, then laughed. "Sure, wine would be nice, but are you sure you're not trying to get me drunk?" "What difference does it make? Drunk or sober, you will still be extremely beautiful." She slowly thought about his sweet but heartfelt words. Extremely beautiful? Did he really say that? She stared back at his hypnotic green eyes. He seemed to really enjoy giving out compliments. Perhaps he loved too much. For the first time, she realized that it might be time for reality for him. "Drunk or sober, I'm not an easy girl," she warned him. "Winning me will be harder for any man than walking on the moon. Just so you know, I'm not a virgin, but at 35 I've had too many failures to commit again until I'm absolutely sure of a guy." John felt his high expectations of quick sexual success with her suddenly dissipate, although part of him sighed in relief. Stealing her heart would be an easy task. Winning her over-sexualized, curvy black body will prove to be a much more difficult task. Falling off the cliff of cheating with Cassie would be much easier said than done, and it's good for giving him a chance to leave without consequences while leaving was still possible. "This is the third time you've been so deep in thought," she said softly, still smiling, but now apprehensively. "I hope my I'm not easy speech didn't scare you, huh?" "Not at all. Some things are truly worth waiting for. Waiting to make love with a wonderful woman like you would be something worth appreciating and enjoying." His words hit her straight in the heart again. She sighed wearily at their meaning. He was just slippery, on the one hand talking about intimate, taboo topics, but at the same time making every word so reasonable and orderly. She didn't say anything. Not wanting to lose the momentum he had built, he continued. "It is understandable that an attractive woman like you would want to be careful, As I said earlier, I too am committed to starting a family and am not looking for a one-night stand. I have already spent years in such relationships. Finding a potential bride and decorating her with a ring and a white dress is where my thoughts really lie. She smiled broadly again and seemed to have lost all her apprehension, although her senses told her that men did not usually talk like that. He was either someone very special or very cunning. No one was so cunning, she suddenly decided to herself, choosing the opinion that he must be special. I hope so, she said, her brown eyes beginning to sparkle. Because I started looking for Mr. Right when I was 17, and it took me more than twice as long to try and find this evasive suitor. I'm starting to think that guy like that has died out like the dinosaurs and doesn't exist anymore. There are still a few of us left, he assured her, and as for me, I am sincere and always on the lookout for that loving, charming lady to call my own, my one and only. His words once again soaked her itchy ears, but she had to admit to herself that the conversation had gone from light and airy to heavy and dark. She chewed and chewed on her need to find a husband, not just a boyfriend. He, on the other hand, also chewed and chewed on his assertion that he was not like most men and was very honest, determined to say yes to the first suitable woman that came along. "Here's your wine, sir," the waitress suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Their voices, although not loud, still managed to echo through parts of the restaurant, making the waitress privy to snippets of their conversation. She felt awkward and tried to waive her responsibility for the right to open the wine. Cassie, the waitress, found out. John, she didn't do it. "The opener is right here," she said, quickly walking away to give them more privacy. "Thank you," he said, glad that the arrival of wine could be a welcome break from difficult conversations about marriage and allergies and one-night stands. He poured her a glass, thinking it might lighten the mood and make it more cheerful. "You haven't played any music until now," he said. She smiled again. "You're right, I'm not. What would you like to hear?" "Everything suits me." A calm person who is easy to please. Perhaps too simple." "What does it mean?" "You quiet men are always the hardest to read and recognize." "How so?" "Well, first of all, you basically agree with everything we women say, and so we never know what you really think or what your real preferences are." "What I'm really thinking about is kissing you again," he whispered. He suddenly pulled his face forward again. Then he pressed his lips to her stunned mouth and sent new waves of pleasure down her spine for a second time. "Wow," she said when he finally pulled away. "You really are a very good kisser, aren't you? You make my knees knock." "This is bad." "No, but it's scary. We women like to be in control. Such arousing kisses tend to blur boundaries." "Are you calling me a gray area?" "I'm not sure what to call you other than to say that I'm pleasantly surprised. Despite all my questioning, scrutiny, and skepticism, you are starting to come across as just a sincere and nice guy. Just what the doctor ordered for a suspicious woman like me. So you still don't suspect me. Other than those deadly, knee-smashing kisses, you're starting to look pretty harmless." "As far as I'm concerned, what you see is what you get," he lied, holding her hand and watching her take a generous sip of wine. They then dined in relative silence, but often exchanged smiling, even adoring glances. After finishing dinner, they talked about everything, then ordered dessert and finished the wine. He reached into his pocket to take out his wallet, but his cell phone was in the way. He pulled them both out and placed the phone on the table, rummaging through his wallet for cash to pay the check. It wasn't enough. He flipped through his many gold cards and placed one on the control plate. Cassie glanced at the name, John Haskins. For the first time in years, she had on her hands a marriage-minded, handsome, charming, witty, funny, romantic super kisser who also drove a $100,000 car and had an impressive wallet full of gold cards. Most importantly, he was lonely and was not seeing anyone at the moment. He also expressed his desire to start dating her if she wanted to. She looked again into dreamy green eyes. With most men, she could afford to be picky or overly cautious. But with John Haskins, she knew she had a too-good-to-be-true dream guy, one in a million, hanging on her hook. Such guys may come once in a lifetime or never at all. She realized that caution and composure might just land him in the adoring arms of some other husband-hungry woman. The opposition rarely played it safe or cool. She knew that if she didn't grab him quickly, some other woman would definitely do it. The fact that he was still available was a miracle in itself. She was determined not to look a gift horse in the mouth. "I really like you," she blurted out, quite ready to lay all her cards on the table. "I really like you too," he retorted, "though I fall in love very easily, so if you keep looking at me with those beautiful big brown eyes, then—" Now it was her turn to kiss, and she did it without letting him finish his sentence. If he was a great kisser, then she was simply great, rocking his world, leaving him gasping and wondering what else she was excellent at. A few moments later, the waitress came over, noticing that he had left a generous tip on the bill. She swiped his card, and approval flashed almost immediately. "Thank you for dining with us," the waitress said, flashing a grateful smile at her company as she walked away. "Before we leave, I need to go to the toilet." "I'll be right back," he exclaimed, standing up and quickly walking towards the back of the restaurant, not realizing that the phone he had left on the table began to buzz. She looked at his phone and recognized the brand. She once thought about buying this expensive model. The saleswoman showed her all its capabilities and showed her how it worked, but in the end, the price was too high. John, however, seemed to have no qualms about paying that much for the phone. She looked towards the back of the restaurant and saw John turn the corner and walk through the door. At least for now, he was out of sight and out of mind, which was not the case with his phone, which buzzed melodiously, signaling the arrival of a text message. She took the phone and looked at it. On these models, you might see the name of the person sending the text message. Stacy. A wave of panic washed over Cassie. Who the hell is Stacy? Friend? And if a friend, then what kind of friend? Girlfriend? A fiancé he may not have mentioned? Or, worst of all, a real wife? The room suddenly began to spin. In such a short time, she had poured so much of her young heart, sensual lips, and hopeful mind into an incredibly hot, charming, and funny guy who seemed, at least on the surface, to be the man of her dreams if she tried to pursue him. Only now he was receiving strange messages from women who may or may not have turned out to be harmless. If only she knew. If only she knew. The saleswoman showed her how the phone worked, and she knew the sequence of buttons to press to read the text. What if she did? What if she did? Then it will destroy the most sacred of foundations of all relationships, trust. Trust. Without trust and faith in your partner's honesty, any relationship can be doomed before it even begins. Did she really think about reading the private message behind his back? She thought about the possible consequences. In this particular model, any text will be shown as read or unread. Still, he might not assume that she was the one who read the text, Cassie thought. She suddenly turned into a bundle of nerves. John skillfully and methodically made her open up and fall in love with him in such a short time. He made her believe that he was willing to continue seeing her if she was in the game. Only if she allowed the relationship to continue would she need to know if he was truly a sincere, sweet guy or just a skilled player whose manipulation skills far exceeded her detection radar. She grabbed the phone and started pressing buttons. The text read, "Dear John, I'm boarding a cruise ship and having a great time. But I miss you already, my love Stacy." Her blood began to boil. 3 words stood out as words commonly associated with someone close. Expensive, I miss it, darling. Cassie felt herself almost hyperventilating. A curse. John seemed so convincing, so sweet, so true to his word, so funny, and so like her in so many ways. He also seemed so rich and acted like he enjoyed being in her company and outright stated that he would like to start dating her. Only now she was holding in her palm a message that seemed to indicate that he might not be who he said he was. Perhaps it really belongs to someone else. She read the text again, just to make sure she had read it correctly the first time, and then filed the text away so he wouldn't immediately know she was spying. She then quietly placed the phone on the table, ready to burst into rage. All her life she had dated men who either tried to use and abuse her or were not who they said they were. She honestly thought John was different. She sighed bitterly. In life, she was lucky enough to have gorgeous, over-the-top, super sexy looks, but that meant all the regular guys were afraid to ask her out because they thought she'd been taken. Only players and guys above average remained. Other sexy beauties competed hotly with above-average guys and fought over them. But she always didn't want to fight over some equally super sexy guy. This left her alone, desperate and vulnerable to players. She seemed to attract liars and cheats like flies. But was John such a deceitful and fraudulent player? Who the hell was this Stacy? How many girls did he know that looked like Stacy? I'm back. His words scared her, nearly sending her through the roof. God, you scared me. Sorry, I just got back. Why so nervous? Who is Stacy? Those two words simply came out of her anxious mouth before she had a chance to consider their implications or possible consequences. First, he might be put off if he knew that she had violated his privacy. If she only had the courage to read private messages on the first day they met, what the hell would she be capable of after just the first week, month, or year? She started kicking herself. She released the cat from the bag, which could not be closed. Still, she needed to know who Stacy was before she got further into this guy. He was a very hot marriage candidate on many levels, but not if he was hiding something from her. What are you talking about? He said with a frightened and guilty look. His face began to turn pink. You got a text from Stacy while you were in the restroom. I did? Now he was in a panic. Without knowing exactly what the damn text said, word for word, he couldn't formulate a suitable lie. She had read something that he had not read, and therefore put him at a clear and dangerous disadvantage. He felt his house of cards begin to collapse around him. Cassie was one of the most beautiful and easygoing women he had ever met, and he began to become fascinated by both her personality and her appearance. Only now she had taken over. She had a message from his wife, but she probably didn't identify herself as such. He decided that he needed to buy time until he could read it himself, and that he needed to go on the attack when the time came so that the balance of guilt could be shifted and evened out. For now, he'll just let her dig herself a deeper hole. Your face is turning red, she whispered, and you look very nervous, as if I caught you in a huge century. He grabbed the phone from the table and quickly pressed the buttons, which returned the offending text. He read it and breathed a sigh of relief. Sure, it was terrible, but it wasn't something he couldn't get rid of with a little cunning and skill. It's time to attack. Did you read my message? Personal private message. It was wrong, I admit, but I was interested. I wanted to make sure you were who you said you were. You don't believe a word of what I say and you read private messages. It's very offensive. Honestly, I didn't think you were like that. What kind is this? Someone who is insecure and will always spy and go behind her partner's back. Do you think I would be pleased? I can't turn away, afraid that you will violate my privacy at every turn. Open emails and open letters. You seem so sweet, so reliable, so special, so wonderfully amazing. But I should have known it was too good to be true. I'm sorry, I have to go. I'll give you a ride to pick up your car, but no. That's all. I don't want to break my heart. I was really starting to fall in love with you. I was really captivated by your looks, warmth, and charm. His words struck like small daggers, thrown with precision and raw emotion that she found difficult to handle. However, she was determined to find out who this Stacy was. Who is Stacy? She asked in a rational and monotone voice, trying to remain calm until the flow of tears came. She really thought that he could be the one, the man of her dreams, but now she seemed so unsure. I don't believe you, he said, feigning outrage. First you violate my privacy, And then you demand to know more about the things you were spying on. Anger flared within her. She was ready to let her guard down and throw herself into his life, and they would probably have made love before she could stop herself. But she was vigilant, stuck to her principles, and demanded that he confess. She slammed the table and then grabbed his arm. "Who is Stacy?" He pulled his hand away and stood up from the table. "We met just one miserable day, and you demand to know all the personal things about me and read personal messages. What's next, I wonder? I'm sorry, but I won't date you anymore. I can't live like this, never trusting, always under surveillance like some common criminal." He pulled out a single $20 bill from his wallet and threw it on the table. "Here, go to a car repair shop with this money." He turned and started to walk away, knowing that one of two things would happen. Either she would just take a taxi and say goodbye to him, or she would chase after him and continue to demand that he confess. He was sure that she would choose the second option. He was right. She followed him and grabbed his arm, holding him in place until she could stand in front of him. A few other restaurant patrons began to watch, but she didn't care. In such a short time, he touched her heart like no other man ever could, and if there was even the slightest chance that he was telling the truth, she needed to know. "For the last time, for the very last time, who is Stacy?" she demanded, instinctively digging her nails into his arm to hold him in place. "You're hurting me," he said. "Be glad I didn't get in your face," she said, seething with all her life as men constantly tried to play with her, deceive her, lie to her, and use her like some piece of toilet paper. In such a short time, he touched her heart, misled her, talked about finding a wife, and showered her with compliments as if she were the best thing that had happened to him. "Okay, you want to know who Stacy is. She's my sister, okay? My damn sister. She's going on a cruise with her fiancé, who I introduced to her. I made her promise to write to me as soon as she got there safely on the plane and then got off to my ship. I'm worried about her. This is her first real trip. If she were a special friend or fiancé or wife, don't you think I would go on a romantic cruise with her?" His words made sense, hitting her brain like a nuclear torpedo. She made the mistake of violating his confidentiality and then implying that he was lying to her. And then she shamefully accused him in public and even dug her nails into his flesh. She was suddenly ready to repent and let go of his hand. "Sorry," she blurted out, horrified at herself. "I should have trusted you. I should never." "I don't forgive," he replied, feigning anger. "It gave me a chance to see who you really are. So I thought that I had finally found the woman of my dreams, who could eventually become the ideal wife. But you turned out to be not who you say you are. Goodbye forever," he added, leaving the restaurant. Part of him hoped she wouldn't follow him, and yet he knew it was just dreams. He manipulated her perfectly, loading her with guilt and making her believe that she was ruining a wonderful chance for a happy marriage. He got into his car and rolled down the window as she approached. "Wait," she begged as he started the engine. "I can't blame you if you don't want to see me anymore, but I still want to apologize for reading your messages and for insinuating your lies. I'm really sorry, but I still want to see you. Give me another chance." "Another chance? What if you keep doing this?" "No," she assured him. "Give me one more chance, and I'll never look at your messages again." "We all make mistakes," he said. Okay, agreed." He held out his hand for them to shake hands, but she had other plans. She leaned through the window and gave him a kiss that was too good to be true. In her desperation to fix the situation, she even swapped tongues with him, causing him to ignite. "Wow," he whispered to her. "For all your talk about me being a good kisser, you're an even better kisser than me." "I guess I had a lot of practice," she shrugged, "but it was always the wrong guys." "You've finally met your match," he assured her. "You're a suitable partner. Come on, sit down. I'll take you to the auto repair shop. I hope your car will be ready." "I hope not," she said to herself. "This way I can keep working on your lips to show you how sorry I am." Again, I'm really sorry, she said, getting into the car and leaning her head on his shoulder. Forget it, he suggested. We all make mistakes, he added soothingly as he pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto the road leading to Buffalo Gap. Before heading outside, he leaned over an oak tree that partially blocked his view. The sight of the silver Lexus speeding past gave him a chill of fear. It was Stacy's father, out for a walk, perhaps shopping or picking up another toy for Marcy. John now realized how stupid he had been to allow himself to be seen with this strange black woman kissing in public. He waited until the Lexus disappeared around the bend. He was grateful to the 100-year-old oak tree that hid his car from prying eyes. Apparently, Stacy's father didn't notice him, or he would have stopped and asked what was going on if he had noticed. It had been many hours since he left Marcy. "There is much more to you than I first thought," she said, touching his stubbled cheek again and again with grateful lips. "Maybe one day I'll do something that I'll have to apologize for." "Like this?" "Excuse me?" She pressed herself against his forgiving shoulder, caressing the light stubble on his cheek. "How's that? You said that maybe one day you'll do something that will make me angry, and then you'll have to apologize." "God knows," he replied, shrugging. "I hope it won't be too serious." "I hope not," she agreed. "Tell me again, what do you do?" He laughed as he pulled out of the parking lot and merged with the traffic, preparing for the turn ahead. "I'm sure you've asked me what I do 10 times already, and I'm sure I've answered you. It almost seems like you're trying to match my stories, perhaps hoping to catch me in a lie. You still don't think I'm a liar or a deceiver, isn't it? I was hoping we were past that stage of suspicion." His words horrified her. She definitely wasn't trying to catch him in a lie anymore, and she was incredibly sad that she had upset him, and incredibly happy that he was so understanding and willing to give her another chance by continuing to help her with the car. "I'm sorry if I gave that impression," she said. "I really think you're real now. I just love hearing your voice, and besides, because I was so caught up in looking into your eyes, maybe sometimes I didn't hear what you were saying. Plus, we talked so much and discussed so many things that I think I forgot half of them. You said you write novels, I think." "Love novels," he replied. "A man who writes love stories? How unusual." "Not as unusual as you think." "I don't agree," she said. "I've never seen a man's name on the cover of a romance novel or a love story. Erotic novels, perhaps, but—" He laughed, cutting her off mid-sentence. "We don't use our real names, dear. Women don't like men who pretend to be decent romance novel writers. Women writers always spend time developing characters and creating interesting, memorable storylines, while men's writers just make you be faced with rough and dirty sex. Women can usually tell the difference after the first few pages, although if we men copy the style of women long enough, sometimes we manage to fool them and make a lot of money. It's a challenge, of course, but interesting challenge." "Oh, look, you missed the turn." "Yes, that's right. Let me turn around." And here we are again on the right track. Just a few meters down a new street, the rusty sign of one of the few auto repair shops in the area stared back at them. Old lawn mowers and rusty car wrecks, mercilessly stripped for parts over the years, decorated the sides of the garage. He parked parallel to one of the boxes, then almost ran to the other side of the car to open the door for her. His actions, again, made her feel special. She wasn't used to being taken care of like this. When she got out of the car, old man Mike Fodder quickly walked out through the glass door and limped towards her. He shook her hand. "My assistant, Ben Tyler, picked up your car a while ago. Well, I looked it over and even hooked it up to old Betsy, which is my analyzer. You can imagine my surprise when he immediately pointed out a problem with the transmission. Your engine is practically dead. On everything in the car, the only way to get to it is to take it all apart. Lucky for you," he said, offering an encouraging laugh. "If I take it apart for you, I also know how to put it back together. I'm just explaining how things are." "Transmission," Cassie said uncertainty. What is this? Like a starter or a generator? No, miss. The transmission controls everything. Yours is practically dead. Cassie began to sweat on her forehead. Are you sure you can fix it? How much will it cost? How long? Well, I won't lie to you, he said affirmatively. It wouldn't hurt me to lie, because I'm a Christian, and all liars, according to the holy book, will end up in the lake of fire. But even if I decided to lie, just to make your life easier, sooner or later I would have to confess. Ugh, having said that, he stated, pausing to put fresh gum in his mouth without spitting out the old one, which made his right cheek bulge and swollen. I think you're looking at, well, at least 3,000 at the top end, but could be 4,000 or more once I get it all sorted. These, don't make your model of sports car anymore, and parts are crazy expensive. And that's even if you find them. But I know a guy in Albuquerque, that's in New Mexico, who is very good at finding these rare parts. But I have to order the transmission, and like I said, on this model, that's why. The price is so high, twice that of a regular car. It will take me a few days, but about the price, since you grew up in this city. Did you recognize me? He nodded, then pointed his finger at her nose. You're Mabel's daughter. The resemblance is almost uncanny. The first black family in this area, and this is already, 80 years ago, I suspect. That's right. I'm surprised you recognized me. No, not that surprising. You graduated the same year as my grandson Toby. You're in his old school book, right next to him. Cassie laughed. A small, fat boy with freckles and flaming red hair, right? It is he. Wow, this really brings me back to memories. I remember him throwing dead frog parts down my dress neckline in biology class and scaring the crap out of me. Boys are boys, Mike answered. Then he looked at John, narrowing his eyes as if deep in thought. I know you too, but it's a little harder for me to remember. I don't think you grew up in these parts, but you know a family from here. I can't remember how they... Oh, yes, some kind of Independence Day picnic, I think. Mike left his words hanging in the air so John could fill in the gaps. Cassie looked at the man she was beginning to fall in love with and fully expected him to fill in those gaps. John suddenly panics. He was at Stacy's parents' house for Independence Day celebrations, so obviously Mike was at one or more of them. If Mike remembers who he is and that he is married to Stacy, everything will be lost. John also very foolishly allowed his mind to go blank. Mike's words shocked him so much that he could no longer remember even a word of what he had told Cassie about his reasons for coming to Tuscola and whether he had roots there. His mother had always warned him that one lie meant he had to tell more and more lies to cover his tracks, but now he couldn't even remember what those tracks were. He decided to change strategy and return the conversation to the looming problem. It was Cassie's car being fixed. Going back to her car, John managed to say, Are you sure it's the transmission? As sure as I am that there is always a hornet's nest swirling around our house, scaring our dog Jasper. You remember Jasper, don't you? Mike asked Cassie. Large German shepherd, light black, almost silver. I can't say I remember, she replied, suddenly concerned about how much money she had in her bank account to cover such an expensive renovation. She wondered if Mike would give her a loan. She slowed down the conversation because she didn't want John to hear. She still retained her pride. Let's get back to the car, John almost begged, eager to get away from the topic before Mike's memories could bring back the missing pieces of the 4th of July puzzle. I'll need some kind of deposit. Maybe 1,000. My guys are good, very good in fact, but they don't work cheap. The other 2,000 when the job is done, in 3 or 4 days. But like I said, since you're practically family, I'll chip in 500. So after the deposit, you'll only owe 1,500. The guys in Houston can get the transmission for this car, but like I said, it's very expensive for this model. If I run into any problems, then problems along the way, I will need a number by which I can reach you. Cassie took out the business card for her antique store in Dallas and handed it to him. The words, "No credit granted," screamed at her from the outside sign of his garage. Cassie panicked. She had maybe 800 in savings, another 500 in her business line of credit, and about 450 on her MasterCard. On the first day of the month, she was already planning this money for the mortgage on her one-room apartment in Dallas. She had already asked many times for help from her parents, who were already having a hard time, but sometimes they could work miracles. "Will you accept a check for 1,000? "Let's just put it on my card," John said, sensing her vulnerability and knowing that Mike wouldn't play with a potentially dishonored check. Her face showed shock, shame, and relief all at once. Was he going to put 1,000 on his card for her? But at what price? She was already boring him with her "I'm not an easy girl" philosophy, so if he was counting on sexual favors, he was looking in the wrong place. However, she was between a rock and a hard place, so as long as he remembered that she didn't give in easily in the early stages of a relationship, she didn't see the harm in it. He had acted like a sweet, generous, caring guy throughout the day, so the idea that he would want to help a potential bride in need didn't seem so far-fetched, especially when he had expressed his desire to start a serious relationship with her. "Okay," Mike said, holding out his hand for the card. 1,000 is 1,000. "No, no, no," John retorted decisively. "You said 2,500 is the total. Put it all on the line." Mike's eyes lit up, but Cassie had a complete feeling of humiliation and anxiety. "No, John, I can't accept this," she choked out in panic. "Honestly, I wouldn't feel good." The name John did not evoke any recognition in Mike when he looked at the card, and so he prayed and hoped that the full name John Haskin would not evoke any recognition either. "Go ahead," he ordered Mike. "Put all 25 on the card. If they find anything else, just add it later to the same number. If they call to confirm, I'll approve, don't worry." "Fits me," Mike said, running into his office, gold card in hand. Cassie hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. "I don't know what to say," she trembled. "Don't think about it. When you have money, you can pay me back, and if you don't, consider it a gift from someone who cares. We're going to be friends, so what's a few dollars between friends? Are you calling at least $2,500 a few dollars? Okay, I understand your point of view, but you have to understand, sometimes I earn more in one day. So what is a treasure to someone may be nothing to me." She kissed him again on the cheek. "Listen, stay here. I'll talk to Mike for a little bit, and then I'll take you back to Dallas." "I could go by bus," she said. "I'm so ashamed. You've already done so much for me." "What are friends for?" he exclaimed. "Besides, fate brought us together for a reason. If we're meant to be together, then we both have to get used to the idea that what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. That's how relationships and marriages work." "It almost sounds like a proposal," she said, "though I wouldn't be able to accept something like that for another month or two. There's so much I don't know about you. And I'm talking about you. But if we keep seeing each other, I hope we can cross every bridge and conquer every island along the way." Spoken like a true romantic writer, truly touching, if a little sentimental. I never said I was a great romantic writer, just a successful one. For me, it's all about the money and the number of books sold, not the art of writing. "Back to the subject of the car," she said. "I want to make it clear that I'm going to give you every penny back." "Well, if it's that important to you, let's say you'll pay me back 100 a month for 25 months. If you give me a blank receipt, I could instruct my bank to simply transfer 100 every month from your account to mine, and then before you know it, you'll pay off the debt." Her eyes lit up at the prospect. "This would be great, so easy to manage, and in the end, you'll get your money back and I won't feel in debt." She rummaged through her purse, found the checkbook, then tore off the top check and handed it to him, adding a thank you as she did so. "Sure, you'll let me take you back to Dallas, I hope." She laughed. I wasn't planning on walking, but I could take the bus if it's too much trouble. Although honestly, if you drove me, it would be nice because it would give us a chance to continue talking and get to know each other even better. Sounds like a great idea, he added. He was about to open his mouth and say something else. She felt like it should have been another great compliment, but it held back. She assumed that he was trying not to overdo it, although the horse-named compliments had long since escaped from the stall. The bright neon lights of Dallas were now visible, and since she lived on the outskirts of it, just around the next corner, he sadly noted that their time together, at least for today, was coming to an end. "When will I see you again?" she whispered darkly, not wanting to leave him as he turned off the highway onto a service road and onto the small ensemble of streets with the names of the trees to which her apartment belonged, namely Maple Street. After a couple of minutes, he noticed a sign pointing to Maple Street and asked her, "Right or left?" "To the left," she said, her heart racing with the sudden thought that she might invite him for coffee. Only she didn't trust herself. His charm was irresistible, and his ultra-sweet kisses were a recipe for disaster in terms of unplanned sex. She wasn't going to risk getting carried away. She was determined to stick to her rule that any intimate relationship should begin only after at least a full month or two of dating, preferably 2 months. "I'd invite you for coffee, but coffee can lead to a lot of other things, especially this late. You must think I'm too sexy to resist, so I'll take that as a compliment," he said as he pulled into her driveway, which was marked number 68. She waited until he turned off the engine, then kissed him with obvious pleasure, from which they both felt a rush of pleasure. She also pressed her breasts against him, and he felt her impressive breasts pressing against his t-shirt. When she pulled away, her hand happened to be on the same light t-shirt, and she was amazed at how sensual his ribbed abdominal muscles felt. He was very fit and very attractive. But she stuck to her belief that, as he had said earlier that day, good things come to those who wait. If they did continue dating when the time was right, then she would explore every corner of his magnificent body and spend the night sharing sweet and passionate love with him. But for now, she could only fantasize. "Thank you for everything you've done for me," she said. "You're a really sweet and considerate guy." "Wait until you really get to know me," he replied flirtatiously. "By the way, you have my phone number, email, and Skype." "And you have mine," she said. "Call me as soon as you get home and we can talk." "Does this mean you're not tired of me yet?" "No, and if you really are who you say you are, I doubt I'll ever get tired." "You still don't trust me," he drawled guiltily. "I trust you," she said. "I'll admit, I was a little wary at first, but now I really trust you and I really like you. That's for sure." By the time John got home, he felt tired but excited. Cassie was easily one of the sexiest and most attractive women he had ever dated, and her personality was surprisingly sweet. It suddenly occurred to him that he was excited by the company she was giving him. Things had gotten decidedly dull with Stacy, but with Cassie things were fresh and exciting. He pondered the consequences of his nevertheless reckless actions. Sooner or later, if he doesn't stop seeing Cassie, real bedlam will begin. Cassie knew everyone in Stacy's parents' hometown, and John still planned to go there on holidays and leave Marcy visiting. He looked at the stars from the penthouse balcony. He decided to go to his office downtown to spend the night rather than go home. Seeing pictures of Marcy and Stacy hanging on the walls would only remind him of what he was doing that was cruel and wrong. If he was tired of Stacy, he should have just told her so and asked for a divorce. Why hurt her by finding out about it some other way? On the other hand, he could have simply stopped seeing Cassie and ended the relationship before it turned into something truly dangerous. However, his own logic made him sick. Marriage was supposed to be about commitment. Marriage vows like, for better or worse, were meant to be taken seriously, not just tossed aside every time one partner got tired of trying or simply didn't want to keep trying. What about his precious daughter Marcy, who thought he was the best in the world? Where was she supposed to end up in all his adulterous plans? or she was simply going to be a casualty of the war, simply pushed aside like a toy or thing he was no longer interested in. It's his daughter, damn it. But even if he had the courage to simply ask for a divorce, what about the injustice to Stacy? He had already cheated on her once, and the devastating effect had broken her heart so much and shattered her soul so cruelly that she ended up in a mental hospital for a while. Only his constant reassurances that he would never do it again, and daily visits from concerned, loving parents, eventually brought her out of this state. She was still on shaky ground, and finding out that he was cheating again could certainly push her into a hole that she would never get out of. And then, of course, there was Stacy's strict, unapologetic father, Stephen, who from day one read John and considered him unreliable and unstable. Ruining everything again would give the old man an excuse to say, "I told you so," and further solidify his hatred of his son-in-law. John turned on the computer and saw 2 notifications. Cassie was now online on both Skype and MSN, trying to contact him. She undoubtedly left him at least 1 email. John sighed as he thought about it all. The further he delayed his relationship with Cassie, the more likely it was that her crush would develop into a strong, unbreakable love. He also had to admit that Cassie, while so dangerously sexy and beautiful, also impressed him greatly with her charm and sweet personality. If he continues to see her, he too will eventually succumb to her charms and truly fall in love with her. What then? Wouldn't it be smarter to just cut ties with Cassie now and end this situation before it becomes a nuclear cloud with consequences that will last a lifetime? And even if he continues to date Cassie, and even if Stacy doesn't find out about it, which is unlikely, will Cassie eventually find out that John was married all along, and that he had been lying to her all this time? What will happen then? Doesn't he risk losing not only Stacy, but Cassie as well? All this sickened him, and at the same time strangely and perversely excited him, making him feel alive and electrified. The pursuit was what he cared about most, trying to win not only Cassie's heart, but also her vulnerable mind. He checked his emails and found 16. 10 were from fan readers, 1 from the publisher, 1 from the editor with his final draft, and 1 signaling another significant payment from Amazon deposited into his bank account. The remaining 3 were from people he'd been thinking about all day: Stacy, Cassie, and even Marcy. Marcy's grandparents certainly gave in to her request to help her write an email to her father to thank him for the trip to Tuscola and to tell him she missed him already. He sighed as he read her letter and wondered if he was really willing to risk breaking the girl's young heart and dreams of growing up in a stable, loving family. The next letter from Stacy also touched his heart. She suddenly expressed a desire for him to be there and regretted that they had not made love before she left. She finished by saying that she wanted to strengthen their marriage by trying for another child. Another child? Having a child at a time when he was thinking about divorce. However, this would only complicate the situation. If Stacy really wanted another child, her guess would be that John wanted him even more, especially considering how they had already discussed it. It would be impossible to delay it, or not try for a baby immediately after she returned. If he tried to use a condom, how would he explain it without admitting that he was seeing someone else? The last letter, from Cassie, told her how grateful she was for his help with the car. She was even more grateful that they were moving forward with their dating plans. She continued by saying that she felt like she had known him for months rather than just one day, and that she was sure they would make a great couple as time went on. She then sent him a list of 10 things she appreciated most about him. She asked him to respond in kind. A few tears ran down his cheek. For all his boasting about being in control and being strong, he knew full well that some things were too stupid to do. The fact that Cassie used to live in Tuscola and still had strong ties there meant that sooner or later someone would find out the truth. As things stood now, Mechanic Mike was just 1 step away from remembering who he was. Then there was the waitress who served them, and the list went on. Cassie will undoubtedly want to return to Tuscola to show John off to her friends. What about the photos of John that Cassie might have posted on Facebook for her hometown friends? or photos of John that she could send to her parents. Wouldn't Cassie's proud parents want to show photos of their potential son-in-law to friends who would see the photos and recognize John? It was a volcano ready to explode in fury, but there was also a potential prize if he kept up the facade. Cassie was gorgeous with her amazing, sexy body. Making love to her, especially considering how alive and sensual she seemed, would be absolutely wonderful. But again, at what price? He desperately wanted to go on Skype and look at his new lover again. Instead, his conscience began to torment him. He poured himself a large whiskey, curled up on the leather sofa, and cried himself to sleep. When he woke up, there were 2 more messages from Cassie on his email and 3 more on his phone. 2 were text messages. 1 was a voice message. She was in a panic, wondering if he made it home okay. She also wondered why he didn't go on Skype or MSN so they could chat. He checked the time. 5 in the morning. He emailed her back to say that he was stuck in traffic due to an accident, resulting in him getting home very late, and that they would talk in the morning. He then added how much he enjoyed meeting her and that he was looking forward to developing their relationship into something special. He also added that there was some magic between them and that they had the potential to go all the way. His finger hovered over the send button for a moment, hesitant. He began to doubt again if he had simply not sent the message and then told Cassie later that he had changed his mind about dating her. The bridge to future hell would have been destroyed forever. Stacy wanted another child. This thought suddenly cheered him up. They discussed this with Stacy. What he liked about the idea was that Stacy seemed to be different from most women. Being pregnant usually means a woman stops having a lot of sex, but for Stacy it was the opposite. When she was pregnant with Marcy, she went from not wanting sex at all to wanting it morning, noon, and night. It was also then that John adored children. His finger still hovered over the send button, but in the end, the thought of making love to Cassie was too much of a temptation. He pressed send. As he did this, he began to think about all the other reasons he appreciated Cassie besides her phenomenal breasts. She was cheerful and sweet. She was kind and charming. All qualities that Stacy seemed to lack. Although Stacy has been trying harder lately, Stacy really wanted their marriage to work, and she was trying to change. It's time to pour yourself another drink. His phone rang again. Cassie. Yes, it was Cassie. Hi, Cassie. John, I just received your letter. It's a shame you didn't get home so well. However, you could have called. I was so worried. I was exhausted and just fell asleep, but now I'm quite awake. I've been thinking a lot about everything you said yesterday. I can't get it out of my head. You made a big impression on me. I'd like to see you again today, if there's nothing special about you. I need to meet with the publisher and... At my house, she clarified, improving her sentence. Nothing much, mind you. I'm not a great chef, but it will give us a chance to talk some more, and also to kiss in private. He considered her proposal. Things were getting out of control with her desire to speed up their relationship. I could try. If you take a swimsuit and I wear my bikini, we have an indoor swimming pool in the backyard of my condo. We could relax, have lunch there, eat by the pool, and swim, and sunbathe. He sighed with excitement at the thought. Bikini, that is, the opportunity to see her buttocks and the sides of her breasts. You know what? I can reschedule my business. How about I come see you at, noon? It's a great afternoon. And, John? Yes? Don't forget your swimsuit. I won't forget, but even if I do, I may always end up not wearing anything. Very funny, but I'm not laughing. See you at 12. What about your store? What about him? Well, can you just close it? I always close it on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays and Tuesdays are slow days for me, so I take them off. Okay, see you at noon. Bye, I'll think about you, she added before hanging up. He leaned back on the leather sofa and poured himself another drink. Then he thought about it and poured the drink back into the bottle. He needed a clear mind. Things were getting out of control too quickly. We met at her house almost naked. Obviously, she wanted to take a closer look at his attractive body, and obviously, she wanted his eyes to enjoy the sight of her body, which would make his tongue hang out all over the pool deck. Where will this all lead? He said to himself. Cassie apparently allowed herself to fall into love as quickly as her infatuated heart would allow, and she was apparently willing to risk the possibility that they might be overwhelmed by temptation and succumb to the pleasures of love. Although she insisted that she was going to stick to her rules for the long haul, common sense dictated that when you play with fire, you'll probably get burned. Cassie put the sandwiches and soft drinks in her bag, then glanced at her watch. It was 10 minutes to 12. John was supposed to come through that door any minute, and it was ready for him. Cassie now apparently believed that John was exactly who he said he was. A millionaire writer, very handsome, very sweet and generous, a man who dreamed of a wife and wanted to start a family. This made him ideal husband material in Cassie's husband-hunting weary eyes. Obviously, Cassie was concerned about securing him before some other husband hunter tried to take him away. Cassie sighed at the thought. She was determined not to just sleep with him. She wanted to wait another month. But swimming in the pool would give her a chance to show off her body and impress him with the fact that she could be his if he played his cards right. However, the thought that other women might not be so patient really irritated her. She'd waited her whole life for a man like John, and she wasn't about to let him slip away to some thief without a fight. She was determined to make him love her. The sooner he proposes, the calmer and more relaxed she will feel. However, deep down, she knew full well that such a strategy could, if she was not careful and vigilant, easily turn against her. John was definitely a real handsome man, and his muscular body in shorts was beyond dreams. Trying to make him fall in love with a bikini, anything could happen. She'll just have to control herself and try not to get too excited. Doorbell. She listened to the sound of her high-heeled sandals clicking on the tile floor as she walked towards the door. She started to sweat. On the other side was someone who could be the man of her dreams. She glanced sideways at the mirror in the hallway. Her huge breasts pressed hard against her tight top, highlighting her large nipples that stuck out through the thin fabric. From the side, part of her breasts was clearly visible. From there, she could see her hips jutting out, making her look super sexy and very hot. At this time of day, all the other residents of the condo were at work, and the pool was usually empty until 6. She will no doubt be left alone to show off her sexy body to the new man in her life. She opened the door and saw his eyes widen in admiration. He froze at the sight of her divine body, unable to close his mouth, from which his tongue was sticking out. She laughed. "Come on, come in. Don't stand on the street with your mouth open." She pulled him inside by the hand and then slammed the door behind him. "Okay, I showed you mine. Now show me yours," she said playfully, tugging at his shirt until he took it off. Now it was her turn to let out a traitorous sigh. He was beyond handsome, with ripped muscles and a dreamy, muscular figure. He was absolutely great. "Now pants," she ordered. "Wait, you have panties under your pants, right?" "I know that, but it's up to you to find out." She frowned in mock indignation. "John, you shouldn't tease me like that. Like I said, yes, I'm curious to see most of you, but I'm not ready to make love until a few weeks, maybe months, have passed. You're wearing shorts, aren't you?" "Yes, in shorts." "Great, then take off your pants." He did as she asked and tossed them aside. She was amazed by his sexy thigh muscles. He was just a dream. "I'm quite handsome, huh?" "Yes, John, you're quite handsome and I'm quite pretty. So can we go to the pool already, please? Can't we stay here for a bit, maybe get something to drink first? And tempt fate, it wouldn't be wise for us to just be here alone, teasing each other, dressed like this. At least at the pool, in a public place, we'd be forced to behave. However, if you want, I'll allow it." You have one kiss on the lips here in my condo." She raised her arms and wrapped them around his broad, inviting white shoulders. "Okay, Johnny, kiss me." He moved closer, his chest softly brushing against her impressive breasts until he felt her nipples dig into him tightly. She felt it too and let out a slight moan. "You have all the skin. Where should I put my hands?" he asked. "Put them wherever you want," she said boldly, "as long as you remember that it's just a kiss." He decided to place them carefully at her lower waist, where his fingers could linger on her glistening buttocks. "Well?" she asked, her anxious lips waiting for him to conquer them. He deliberately delayed time, wanting to enjoy the moment. He then allowed his hands to slide further down her buttocks as he slowly pressed his mouth to hers. She raised her hands to his cheeks, squeezing them, holding them, before finally releasing herself, smiling until she pulled his hands off her buttocks and opened the door. "Can't I get one more kiss?" "When we're dressed like we are now, there's no such thing as just one more kiss," she explained. "Until now, we are playing with fate too dangerously. Let's stop before we lose. Here, bring us our lunch." "You really have a way of ruining the mood," he whispered as she led him down the hall, then down the stone steps, where the brilliant Texas sun was already falling on them, washing over their excited bodies. "Sometimes the only thing that can save a lady in distress like me, or an overexcited knight in shining armor like you, is when the mood gets ruined. Come on, we can kiss by the pool. At least there'll be a lifeguard there to keep us from drowning in our passions." The next 2 weeks passed unbearably slowly. John drove to Dallas every day to see Cassie early in the morning and join her for an easy morning run through the park and downtown. After that, they always had breakfast in a cozy bakery, where John and Cassie enjoyed the heavenly pleasure of enjoying each other, without ceasing to talk. They treasured every moment they had together. He took her everywhere, to cafes for lunch during the day and to chic restaurants in the evening for dinner. Sometimes they went to the theater, sometimes they danced. He forced her to close her store for the entire 2 weeks, paying her in advance for the supposed 10 working days so that she would not lose a penny. During the day, they either had a picnic in the park or went to the museum. Sometimes he took her to the lake, where they walked along the shore, sat on boulders, kissing, or jumped in the water, as she did when she was a happy child. And yet, despite so much fun and light romance together, his conscience never gave him a moment's peace, warning his confused and wounded mind that he was winning Cassie's heart at an alarmingly fast rate and filling her head with fantasies of, for hinting at how much he loves Christmas weddings. As a married man, he would not have been able to propose such a wedding to her, unless, of course, he had committed the cardinal sin of marrying 2 women at the same time. While on the cruise, Stacy was on standby and Marcy was out of sight and out of mind, allowing John to spend every free minute of those 2 weeks with Cassie, throwing compliments at her constantly as if they were temporarily activated grenades. Such grenades exploded in her anxious heart and mind until every ounce of resistance was gone. When the 2 weeks were up, she finally started to break down. Their whirlwind romance had driven her sex-hungry and loving body into a corner, to the point where she was no longer sure how long she could hold on. She was ready to give herself completely to him, and that included her mind, soul, heart, and body. All he could do was say that he didn't want to see her anymore, and then tell some crazy lie, like that he preferred men. He imagined himself doing just that for a moment, but when her rich velvet voice sounded so seductive in his ears, all he could think about was her long, silky smooth legs and her hot thighs. The image of her perfect, round buttocks was also so enticingly imprinted in his mind. "I know what you're thinking," she suddenly whispered. "What am I thinking about?" "You're thinking about making love to me." "How do you know?" "Because I'm thinking about the same thing, about making love to you." He froze, his mind screaming at him to do the right thing and leave her before this physical connection bound him to her forever. If he was going to lie and say he was gay to get out of the relationship, now was the last chance to do it. "You're not saying anything," she whispered sensually. You somehow stunned me with your last statement. It means you're ready, you know? A woman never reveals her intentions. Let's just say that the next time we meet, I may not have the strength left to resist your advances, if, of course, your advances are strong and seductive enough. You've never loved a black woman, have you? And you never loved a white man. At least that's what you told me. So it turns out that this will be a real first time, if, of course, my advances are strong enough, as you said. I'm not such a simple girl, she said teasingly. You will have to put in a lot of effort. The playful exchange made him feel guilty. She connected her world with him, and he belonged to another. He suddenly hated himself with fervor. Earth, John, are you there? Her words suddenly seemed like pieces of another language, floating around a mind mired in confusion and self-hatred. With Stacy's flight delayed until Thursday, John will be able to spend the night at Cassie's without the risk of being caught by his wife if Cassie, in her new mood, tempts him with an offer to do so. But a night at Cassie's condo and immersing himself in sex with her for the first time will condemn him to a tightrope walk that will be impossible in the future. Once Stacy returned, he wouldn't be able to just get up and leave her warm bed and walk out the front door in the middle of the night without Stacy making a scene and becoming suspicious. A man simply doesn't leave home and spend the night somewhere else unless he's involved in something bad. John, why don't you answer? Everything is fine. John, oh, sorry. I'm here. My publisher just sent me an urgent letter. Spending so much time with you during the day, I ended up not sleeping at night. Nighttime, after midnight, is when I work best. But I haven't written at all lately, and the deadline has already passed. I guess with the kind of money you have and the royalties you have yet to receive, you could almost retire if you wanted to and still be set for life, right? I guess, he admitted, but I'm one of those guys who lives for writing. I know it's weird to see a guy spending his nights away from home, writing in his office, but that's what you'll have to put up with if you want to date me. Cassie froze at his words. He hadn't mentioned before that he couldn't stay home at night. It seemed so strange, so damn strange. And yet, if he was making millions doing it, then maybe that was the price he was paying for not having a regular 9-to-5 job. However, it suddenly occurred to her that she couldn't continue to sleep alone every night, especially if she had a man. Then it also suddenly occurred to her that she could always sell her store and just become a housewife if they ended up getting married. If he slept during the day and worked in the office after midnight, then she could adjust her schedule so that she could simply make love to him and sleep along with him during the day. But you didn't sleep during the day at all during those 2 weeks when we met together, Cassie suddenly blurted out, trying not to seem suspicious. Because, as I said, I was so happy and excited to meet you that I stopped writing altogether. But I need to start writing again. Alarm bells were now ringing in her mind like loud sirens. Did he say he couldn't be home at night? It didn't make sense. But she decided not to try to understand everything at once, but to simply test him by making him suddenly find himself in a difficult situation. Does this mean you won't be able to stay the night if I suggest it one day soon? One day soon? How about tonight? Her heart was now pounding like a jackhammer. She made the invitation spontaneously without thinking properly. This was not how she imagined their first night together. She hoped that it would happen more spontaneously, that the offer to spend the night would come as an unexpected surprise. But she was suddenly desperate to find out if he would agree to give up such amazing sex because of some stupid book deadline. Besides, her proposal had now driven him into a corner. If for some reason he couldn't stay at her house for the night, then her proposal would reveal that. She still trusted him completely, but a test like this would prove who he really was once and for all. She waited on the other end of the phone line, holding her breath. "I'll come, of course," he said. "Is 8 in the evening appropriate?" "Do it at midnight," she whispered. "Come in your swimming trunks and meet me by the pool. We can kiss, hug each other tightly, and we can tease each other, and then when we can go up to my apartment." "And, John?" "Yes?" We will make love all night long, and in the morning we will have breakfast together in bed. So even if you thought of trying to sneak away from me at night, you will stay in my arms, right? There's no place I'd rather be than in your arms all night, he replied seductively. Okay, she whispered back, her thick nipples hard and tingling with the arousing thought. Because that's where you'll be, naked in my arms. Are you sure about this? He said. I know you. I'm so sure I've already officially started taking the pills, she said seductively, almost mockingly. She swallowed the second pill and then wrote it down on her calendar. She wasn't supposed to take it until the morning, but since she had just started taking the pills, she didn't want to risk it. Getting pregnant now without getting married would be a real disaster. Plus, Cassie had always imagined that she wouldn't get pregnant until at least 3 years after the wedding. The 3-year honeymoon period of hot sex was always easier to achieve without a baby on board. Her man arrived, and she saw his car pull up to the visitors section. She checked her fresh coat of sparkling red lipstick in the mirror, then admired her bikini body. She walked out the door and felt the crescent moon shyly illuminate her dark chocolate shoulders, but a million stars shone brightly, illuminating Cassie's hopes and dreams and reflecting brilliant light off her long, curly locks. Tonight was supposed to be their night, and there was nowhere to retreat. There was no one else at the pool except them, and gently swaying branches obstructed the view from the windows of other condos. There were certain nooks and crannies in the pool area where it was almost impossible to see what they were doing from the upper floors. Let's go into the water, she begged, but stay at the deep end on the right side. No one will see us from there. He did as she asked, slipping into the water and shivering as the cool water cooled his flesh. Damn, it's cold, he said, shivering. Don't be a baby, she countered, giggling. The water is actually quite warm once you get used to it. He crouched down to completely immerse his head in the water, wanting to finish this quickly. His head came up with a splash, and when he stood up, the water ran seductively down his six-pack abs. Are you sure we can't be seen from the windows from here? He asked. Absolutely, she replied. They then hugged tightly as they walked up the steps leading to her place. They were two people madly in love, and they both knew it. Once inside her apartment, he picked her up and stretched her body out on the bed. The rising morning sun playfully filtered through the half-opened curtains, cutting a streak of bright light through the shadowy bedroom, illuminating the darkened corners and warming her naked skin until she began to stir from a contented sleep. She pressed herself closer to the man of her dreams, pressing her back tighter against his muscular body and squeezing his hands tighter on her large, full breasts. He suddenly woke up, his gentle yawn releasing warm, sensual breath onto her neck. You were incredible last night, he whispered to her, aware that they were still spooning together. Opening his eyes, he looked with admiration at her curvaceous form in the mirror of the dressing table. I don't know about me, she replied. All I know is that I was in the sweetest heaven all night long. It was the best sex of my life. Stacy Haskins looked down at San Antonio International Airport, her short blonde hair styled to one side of her pretty face. She freshened up her lipstick and mascara in the compact powder mirror. She wanted to look sexy for her husband, who was expected to pick her up any moment after landing. She asked her parents over the phone to babysit Marcy for an extra day, and they were very happy to do it. Stacy wanted John all to herself for the next 24 hours. Her desire to have a child was overwhelming and intense. In her opinion, this would give their decrepit marriage a new impetus. The pilot now began his final approach, and the plane tilted to the left, giving her a better view of the field of hangars and the distant lights that told her she would soon be home and in the arms of her husband. Being without him for 2 whole weeks was long enough, but the other 4 days added due to the lack of flights out of Florida left her feeling anxious and overstimulated. She remembered how much her pregnancy with Marcy had affected her the last time. Literally overnight, she went from having sex once a month to once or even twice a day. Plus, having a child would give Marcy a much-needed sibling. John asked her to think about the possibility of getting pregnant again, and she promised to think about it while she was at her sister's wedding. The wheels touched down on the runway, causing a slight shock among the passengers and the usual stupid applause that often accompanies such a mundane task. Stacy hated such insignificance and often voiced her disdain, exposing herself to others as a cruel, joy-killing snob. She came from a small town, but her time at Princeton and Columbia University had made that small-town charm fade. She met John when he came to give a guest lecture during a creative writing course. She found him sweet and caring, not like the usual narcissistic men she usually chose to spend her nights with. But John had this macho, strong, muscular look and such dreamy green eyes that it was too hard for her to resist. She herself seemed cold and harsh, exuding an aura of privilege. But John liked a challenge, and he quickly ensured that her body was between the sheets and her heart locked among his personal belongings. Their marriage had been rocky, but Stacy still loved him, was proud to show him off in public, and loved even more the big money his popular books continually brought in. She also enjoyed the luxurious trips he took her on and the expensive designer clothes and jewelry that accumulated in her spacious closet. Once or twice, when their relationship became particularly strained, John broached the topic of divorce. The word divorce irritated and repulsed her to the core. John was hers and would always be hers, just like the 3 sports cars he had bought for her that sat in their driveway. When he cheated on her that time, it was as if the earth had stopped spinning, and as if all life as she knew it had stopped. It drove her temporarily insane and shook her mind, soul, and heart to the very core. In her own way, she truly loved him more than life itself. And now, for the first time in a long time, she really wanted him to know that. Being in the first seat in first class meant she could get off the plane first. She then quickly walked to the baggage carousel and saw her burgundy leather suitcase coming down the ramp. She waved to the mover to take her only suitcase outside. Her heart was beating fast and her mouth was dry with excitement. Her newfound love for her husband was real and alive, coursing through her veins like some energizing source of life that kept her happy and optimistic. John stood on the other side of the long, sloping ramp, watching her wave when she saw him. He noticed that she had cut her long blonde hair, probably because he often said that he liked her neck and that kissing her was great fun for him. His phone was ringing madly. He'd spent the last 3 days staying with Cassie, and she'd been texting him to see if he might happen to change his mind about staying another night. He turned off the phone. The real Mrs. Haskins was now only a few meters away. She threw herself into his arms and covered his face with kisses, not paying attention to those around her. John motioned for the man to continue carrying her bag, and he did so, confident of a generous tip. And so it was. "I missed you," he lied, enjoying her kisses as he led her to the large glass doors that opened automatically. She pressed herself against him as he got into the car, and that's when it dawned on him that he hadn't walked around the car to open Stacy's door like he had done for Cassie. "I can't wait until we get home," she teased. "You, of course, received my letter that I finally agree with you about having another child." "I got it," he admitted, trying to seem inspired. He wasn't sure of his feelings, knowing only that if he hadn't had an affair with Cassie, today might have been the happiest day of his life. Cassie sat on the couch with her knees pressed to her huge breasts. Her desperate attempts to get John to come and spend a 4th night went unanswered. She was desperate to discuss with him personally what she had learned from the doctors after he left for San Antonio that morning. The doctor explained, to her horror, that birth control pills usually don't work on day 1 as she thought. They could take several days to accumulate in the system before they take effect. The doctor did not guarantee that the pills would work so quickly, only that they might not work. Cassie was now shaking with fear. She hadn't properly researched how to properly use those damn pills before she started taking them, and now there was a chance that she would become a mother against her will. Crap! That was all she could say. There was no way she was going to raise the child alone. If she turned up pregnant on the scheduled pregnancy test, which was due in 10 days, then she wanted assurances from him now that, since they loved each other, he would, under the circumstances, marry her as soon as possible so that the child had a legal father. John, however, did not return her calls or texts. She pulled her laptop onto her lap and typed a message to him. Dear John, I saw the doctor today and just found out that I might be pregnant. Please call me back as soon as possible. With love, your precious Cassie. She reread her letter, then pressed send. She had no qualms about calling herself his precious Cassie because, after all, that was what he called her. My precious Cassie. What happened to you? Actually, he said, I've been feeling a little under the weather lately, a little lethargic and tired since you left. I think my tone has dropped a little. Is it true? You didn't mention this in your letters or calls. I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to ruin your trip. She kissed him hard on the lips. What a caring husband. But don't worry, we can try again in a few hours. In a few hours? Of course, fool. If it doesn't work out the first time. Besides, I promised you that I would give you another child, and I'm going to do it. So in a few hours, when you've rested, I'll be tired but ready. And this time we won't stop. Marcy will be back tomorrow, and you know how hard it is for us to have privacy when she always bursts into the house without knocking. He didn't answer. She snuggled up to him and asked him to make her a drink. She was really in the mood and wanted to stay that way. He stood up and opened the whiskey decanter, pouring an ounce into the glass. Then he threw in 2 ice cubes and picked up a bottle of ginger ale, but it was empty. She frowned. Don't we have any ginger ale in the fridge downstairs? I think so, he replied, pulling on his pants and walking down the spiral wooden stairs. Stacy felt great after their amazing sex, and she lay back on the bed, propped up by a few pillows, and dug through her purse on the bedside table for her phone. Normally, she would just use the house phone by the bed, but John had turned it off earlier before her trip so he could use it in the office. She sighed as her phone suddenly blinked, indicating that the battery was low. She hadn't thought to charge it during or after the long flight. She was so focused on making love to her husband that she hadn't yet called Marcy to say hi and let her know she was back. She then began rummaging through her husband's pants and found his phone, but it was turned off. She turned it on and was relieved to see that it was fully charged. She was about to dial Marcy's number when the phone suddenly rang. She made a face when she saw the new number. She regularly checked her husband's phone, keeping an eye out for obsessive, wide-eyed female fans who hounded him for an autograph or a date. She and her husband often laughed about it, and he assured her that they had simply gotten his number from one of his disillusioned former publishers who was trying to get him into trouble. She was confident that he would never cheat on her again, so she wasn't too concerned. In addition, to convince her of his honesty, he allowed her to copy all these fan numbers, only she did not recognize this number. Cassie Devereaux. Cassie Devereaux? She shrugged and pressed the answer button. If it was one of his empty-headed fans, she would simply tell them that John was happily married. This was usually enough to scare them off. Hello? I'm looking for John. John is here, but he is busy at the moment. May I ask who is calling? Cassie's heart began to beat faster. She didn't expect to hear a woman's voice. Who is this? His sister, his housekeeper, asked Cassie. Stacy began to realize that something was wrong. This is his wife. Who is him? His wife. This is impossible. John is not married. It's strange, because I'm wearing his wedding ring. I'm Stacy Haskins, his wife. Both women fell silent, trying to rethink the situation. Stacy had encountered calls like this before and could explain them away as stupid fan calls, but the number was already in John's phone. John must have known this woman to put her number in his phone. But if he knew her, why didn't he tell her that he had a wife? Why hide it? Cassie gathered her will and continued. Are we talking about the same person? About 6 foot 2 inches tall, very muscular, with a little thinning hair at the top, green eyes, usually with a little stubble, drives a blue BMW and has a cute Mickey Mouse tattoo at the end of his lower back, right on the edge of the left buttock. Have you seen his butt? How did you two meet? I met him 3 Mondays ago in Tuscola. Stacy began to shake. Is this some kind of cruel joke? Cassie felt tears suddenly flood her cheeks. I wish I could. Maybe I'm pregnant with his child. Damn, I knew he was too good to be true. I just knew, just like everyone else. Dirty, sneaky liar. Used me for sex. Promised he loved me and that one day we will get married. Stacy felt her world crumble, but her curiosity was piqued. What do you look like? She asked. Who cares what I look like? Just please tell me. Are you tall and skinny? Yes, tall. I have a narrow waist, but I'm curvy, with wide hips and round buttocks. You want to know what attracted him to me, right? She spoke sharply. You want to know what I have that you don't? Something like that. And your hair, blonde, like mine? Blue eyes, too. We black women are not born with blonde hair or blue eyes. Oh, black. Very dark, like chocolate. Like chocolate. I can't believe he did this to me, made me fall in love, gave me hopes of marriage, and possibly got me pregnant. Damn that bastard. It's not the first time he's done this, but it will be the last. Goodbye, Cassie. I have to go. Stacy pressed the end call button, abruptly ending the call. She turned off John's phone so Cassie couldn't call again. Stacy then put it back in his pants pocket. She could hear his bare feet stomping on the wooden floor as he began to walk up the steps. Sure enough, he found ginger ale. She pulled out the metal box she kept in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. She then began rummaging through the top drawer for the key. Where the hell was the key? John was about to enter the room, leading with a look of pure snow, but Stacy knew better. Honey, could you bring some more ice? There's a lot of ice in the thermal container, he said, being only a few steps from the door. No, I accidentally knocked it over. Can you bring some more? Okay, honey. I'll bring it now, he said when she hid the box under the blanket. Her unstable mind, coupled with his reckless infidelity, had already landed her in a mental hospital once. She no longer controlled herself, but simply allowed her sinister anger to push her fragile mind forward. He placed the bottle of ginger ale on the nightstand and walked out into the hallway again. I'll be back in a moment, he said as his footsteps receded along the upper corridor. She pulled the box back into her lap and fiddled with the lock to open it. Key, damn key, she whispered, rummaging through the top drawer again, trying to find it, as her whole mind began to experience painful confusion. And then she remembered. They placed the key high on the closet shelf so Marcy wouldn't accidentally reach the loaded gun. Their house was once robbed, and John bought it just in case, safely hiding it in a metal box. She jumped off the bed and ran to the closet, standing on her tiptoes and starting to feel around the top shelf. She still couldn't find the damned key. She grabbed the chair that was in front of her dressing table, quickly dragged it and stood on it, carefully inspecting the shelf. A silvery glimmer caught her attention among the cobwebs. She reached for it. Finally, the damn key. His steps began to pound rhythmically on the wooden steps. He was only 30 seconds away. She jumped back onto the bed and began fiddling with the lock. He was 20 seconds away. The key went in easily. She opened the lid and began to rummage through the papers, feeling for the pistol at the bottom. You are a cruel, cold bastard, she whispered in rage, throwing the box onto the carpet and pointing the gun at the door. He was 10 seconds away, and then she wondered, is the gun loaded? Ammo! Where did they keep the cartridges? She threw the drum back and breathed a sigh of relief. It contained 6 rounds of ammunition, ready to fire. He was 5 seconds away. Fuse. The weapon will not fire if the safety is on. Where was that safety catch? She suddenly found it and turned it off. He was 2 seconds away. He only had 2 seconds left to live, she thought to herself. Her hand was stable and calm, and her nerves were not irritated by adrenaline. Why wasn't she nervous? She immediately understood the answer. She was going through another full-blown attack like the one that sent her to the mental hospital the last time he cheated. Only this time it was worse, much worse. She snapped out of a fully functional state of mind and placed all her hopes on the new baby. Only he seemed to be trying to make a new baby with someone else. This thought ate her up inside and filled her with anger. Her mind crumbled and her thought process became a useless, tangled mess of nerve endings that had become disconnected and shattered with the knowledge that her world was crumbling before her eyes. He knew how fragile her mind was after the last time his thoughtless, selfish betrayal had unsettled her and plunged her into madness. And yet, he was 1 second away. He was probably planning to run away with Cassie, but not if she could stop it. Not if she could fucking interfere. Zero. There's no time left. There was no time to think. There was no time to do anything other than pull the trigger. Her eyes were now lifeless. Her heart was exploding with such unbearable grief that tears flowed like a river. He had completely destroyed her fragile mind once again, but this time without any hope of repair. She will never be the same again, but neither will he. Honey, you said that the ice bowl fell. It's still on the counter, still full, still. He suddenly saw the gun and for a moment thought she was going to do some crazy sex game. And then he saw her eyes, lifeless but strangely dancing and wild, her whole body trembling as if she was no longer in control. She sobbed as her broken heart exploded. Cassie might be pregnant, Stacy muttered. Did you know about this? How did you know about Cassie? Does it matter, you bastard? Does anything matter after what you did? Just stay calm and give me the gun. Come and take it, she told him in a low, eerie whisper. Her voice sounded different, almost as if she was possessed or had suddenly acquired a split personality. He was now scared to death. He froze for a moment, not wanting to provoke her. She began to drool, falling apart like an incorrigible accident, desperately trying to preserve herself long enough to complete one more task before slipping into complete mental oblivion. Cassie might be pregnant, Stacy repeated again, this time in a monotone, monotonous voice that told him she was no longer playing with a full deck. The doctors warned him last time, saying that she would not be able to withstand another betrayal from him. Every woman is different. Some people just resign themselves, take everything in the divorce from their husband and move on. Others cry and then take their husband back for another attempt at fidelity. But for Stacy, it wasn't that easy. Her entire world revolved around John, and her existing mental illness remained in the shadows only as long as he fully supported her. Instead, he had now dealt a blow from which she would likely never recover. And she was the one with the gun, the loaded gun. John was stuck between the far side of the bed and the door. Even if he rushed past the bed, he would hardly have time to reach the door. Was it because her skin was dark like chocolate? You always loved chocolate, John pleaded. Stacy, put the gun down. Don't pull the trigger. Think about your daughter, Marcy. Do you want her to grow up without a father? You'd like me to put the gun down, wouldn't you, Johnny, so you could run away with her? Only she doesn't love you anymore, but I'll let her get her own gun. You destroyed me for the last time. She squeezed the trigger and then continued to squeeze it. Detective Arnie Wexford handed the coffee to District Attorney Josephine Telland. Thank you. A sad story, if you ask me. The most tragic experience I have encountered in 10 years of working in Texas. HM, how is the victim doing? Which one? They are all victims, if you ask me. Who are you going to blame? Nobody. He doesn't apply, and she's in a mental hospital, fiddling with her fingers and drooling most of the time. Doctors say that with extensive treatment, she could come out of this in a year or two, just like last time. And he? She shrugged. No changes yet. And that other girl, with whom he cheated, I think her name is Cassie, right? Well, maybe they'll end up together after all. Maybe, who knows? She may not want him after he lied to her about being single. When you said earlier that he has no changes, what did you mean? 2 bullets hit the arm, and 1 bounced off the thigh. Only superficial wounds. Really? He'll be fine. I meant that he is no worse than he was before the shooting. Crap. Poor guy. But considering that you are a woman, you probably think he got what he deserved? I don't know if I want to go that far. Let's just say any man of mine would be in trouble if he tried to have 1 wife too many. I'll take that into account, said the detective, laughing. She sat under the moonlight, the stars like a billion bold diamonds, turning the darkness into a flash of brilliant sparks. It's so beautiful here. I have so many dreams. I'm really sorry I got you into this, Cassie. I don't, she whispered. It breaks me inside that you lied like that. Obviously, you wouldn't have been able to marry me if she hadn't done what she did. Now you can file for divorce and get it pretty quickly. In 6 months or a year. And your daughter, what's her name? Marcy. She is now with her grandparents. I agreed for her to spend more time with them. From now on, I will bring her to them every weekend. If you want, can I introduce you to my parents? Never. At least not yet. Tuscola is full of gossip right now. You have no idea. But when things settle down in a few months, then of course it will be nice. She turned to face him. You're not hiding anything from me anymore, are you? No more lies. No more women in the shadows I should know about. Absolutely nothing, he said honestly. He put his hand on her shoulder, expecting her to push him away like last time. But she grabbed his hand and even pressed his fingers to her cheek. I experienced pain, she explained. It took me weeks of crying buckets and hours of chatting. Then the last few days I just sat there, dazed and confused. But in the end, my heart decides what my mind should do. I still love you. Looks like I'll always love you. I'm ready to give you another chance. Understand? Well, in that case, take this. She sighed as he opened the box. An engagement ring worth $20,000 sparkled in front of her. Wow, it's incredible. So are you, he responded. She kissed him passionately. Despite all her anger and pain, her love was even hotter, and she wanted him to hold her even tighter. I just adore you, he whispered. I know, she said, and that's why I can't stop loving you. I never knew it was possible to love someone so much, he said honestly, his eyes burning with desire as he looked at her stunning, curvaceous body. You know, as it turned out, I'm not pregnant. God, what a fool I am. With everything going on, I forgot to ask about it. One day, when everything settles down and I become your wife, we can have a child. But for now, wear this, she said, handing him a condom. So for now, I'll make love to the most special future wife in the entire universe. As long as you remember that 1 wife is too many. Lesson learned, he promised. He was determined to make all her dreams come true. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.